Welcome to the Dealing with Goliath podcast. The mission of Dealing with Goliath is to sharpen the psychological edge in business leaders with skin in the game who want to be more effective under pressure, uncover hidden value, and increase profitability. With expert guests across the business spectrum, we deliver gems of wisdom delving into their methods, their thinking and approach to business, life, and problem solving. This is the Grande Cup of Insight, so long-form podcast interview format here, where we take the time to delve a little bit deeper into our guests' experiences, stories, and to get at those priceless nuggets for you. So I'm your host, Al McBride. My guest today is Róisín O'Farrell. Róisín began her art career from a standing start over 10 years ago and now exhibits in established galleries in Ireland, the UK, Europe, and the United States. Her art business, now at multiple six figures with a team of 5, has grown to include print sales in over 17 stores nationwide and a digital school for emerging artists who want to learn to paint or to learn to get their business mojo going. So from the simple joy of painting to passing on the skills to make a living from your art, she's committed and passionate about teaching, sharing, and living creativity. Now, I have to say on a personal note that I've known Róisín for many years, since back in a previous life when I was an art dealer, and Róisín is a very old and dear friend. But on the business side of things, Róisín is a uniquely talented artist. But combined with that is a remarkable mind for business. And so it is an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, Ro.
Hi, well, I'm delighted to be here.
Very good to have you, very good to have you. So let's dive straight in, because it is a little bit unusual. When you think business person, a lot of people wouldn't normally think artist, painter, printmaker. So let's deal with that one straight away. And what are some of those common myths about your industry or common myths about artists that you might want to set the record straight?
Well, of course, the big myth is that artists can't make money. That's that's going back to the starving artist in the garret, And of course, back in the medieval times, artists survived by having a patron, and in more recent times, artists were separated from the business of making money and making a living by kind of outsourcing all of that to a gallery. And so the gallery system became the yin to the creative yang of the artist. They did the selling and the dealing with the business side of things. However, it's not true to say that all artists can't make money. For sure, there's lots of creative people who don't enjoy that part of it, but there are as many who are and who can learn to be good business people with good sound business sense, and to some degree by putting that stereotype out there, and particularly in art colleges, in art schools, where to be honest, there is very little in terms of preparing young artists to make a living from their art. And in fact, I'd go further than that. I would say that for many artists who go through art schools, they are actually taught that making money is kind of dirty.
Right, it still has that. Okay.
It makes you commercial, which is the death knell to the creative purpose. Instead of teaching artists how to protect the creative process, how to make good decisions about how much of the business side they want to engage in, and how to get the best representation, the best deals, the best help and support, or to take on which parts of it yourself. That's really necessary, I think, for artists today.
Okay, yeah, it's a very different perspective. I mean, when I was an art dealer, I worked in a gallery, then I was out on my own, and there was very much that opinion that artists should focus all their energy on creating the art, and if they're trying to do marketing or trying to do any of the other business functions, that's draining what should be the focus on the art. I mean, it must be a careful balance that you have to get right.
It's a careful balance, and I think that there isn't a one-size-fits-all situation here. So for some artists who are creating work that takes all of their energy, or they're the kind of person who needs to completely focus on that to do important work, then I think we as a society need to support that, because that work is important to us as a humanity. And so that's where you get supports for the arts, grants for art, and bursaries and organizations, and that's important. But not every artist is the same. And some artists are well capable, and by treating them all like children and sort of saying, now, we'll all look after the money, is not good for everybody. It is a support that sometimes, in some circumstances, in some ways, is necessary and important as, you know, as a system, as an industry, as a society. But I think that we need to give artists the skills early on in order to make good decisions for themselves. And I think that that would really enrich the work as well in the long term. You'd have more of a breadth of what's available to us if I think we took that approach.
It's a very interesting point. I mean, you're reminding me of, you know, the E-myth and this idea of the technician entrepreneur. So whether they're, in your example, a painter or a sculptor or a chef, you know, it's more common for the chef to bring in someone to manage front of house and to manage, so they can manage all where their expertise is. But equally, there are plenty of chefs, thinking of Gordon Ramsay, who have an amazing head for business. You know, he's opened more Michelin star restaurants than anyone else in the world. This kind of thing. So it can go both ways, can't it?
And you know, in the sort of example that you lay out there with a chef, you know, just because you have a top class chef who is creating innovative and progressive recipes, it doesn't mean he has to be in the kitchen every single night, 7 days a week. And similarly, I mean, look at Damon Hirst in terms of how he was running his studio, where it was almost like going back to that medieval school where he had students actually working on his pieces. And that, of course, was really controversial at the time. So I think that as we go forward with art and this industry, we need to, in the same way that religion and science are beginning to have more of a dialogue, I think that art and business need to have more of a dialogue.
It's a very interesting point. I mean, how did you? I mean, I know some of the answer here, but it'd be interesting to take your fresh take on it. How you got to where you are now, in the sense that I know you have a history both with art, but also with different business projects. So did you get a very circuitous route to where you are now?
Absolutely, a hurly-whirly route. I think. And I think that at a certain point in my progression in my career, I almost felt ashamed of that route of, you know, starting here and kind of going all around and ending up somewhere else. And now I don't have any shame about that. And I look at so many entrepreneurs and you see that. Entrepreneurs who maybe didn't fit the corporate route, women entrepreneurs who didn't fit that sort of gender-based way of doing things and decided just to go ahead and do it their own way. I was recently at an award ceremony, the Every Woman award ceremony, and so many women who just either were laughed at for their ideas or couldn't progress for all sorts of reasons, and who just decided to do it their way, their own way. They just took a left turn, and I did that. I didn't go to art college, even though I came from a family of artists and members of Aistona and successful artists. I decided not to do that at the time. My first business failed. Well, it failed. I ended it, but it never made any money. Had a blast, but learned so much from that first experience.
What was that? Just to
well, when I left school, I became a veterinary nurse.
Right.
That was my second passion, was animals. And I went to London, I went to college over there. And then I decided, you know, I'd kind of got to a stage of working in London as a practice manager for some of the veterinary surgeons and veterinary clinics over there. And I really enjoyed that, but there was nowhere to go with that. Again, it's that sort of dollars for hours idea. I was working for someone else. And I decided to come back to Ireland. I missed Ireland. And my first business was called Pet and Property Care. It was basically where I managed people who did pet walking, house sitting for pets, and also a system of people who would take a dog into their home when the owner would go on holidays. And so that was in the what was that? The very early 90s, and Ireland wasn't really ready.
I
We
was
were
going to say
still
that
at
was
that
well
stage.
ahead of your time there,
Yeah,
right?
it just was sort of before my time. And so I had a really great lifestyle. I loved working for myself. I was busy, it was fulfilling, but I never really made any money. And
Right.
that was my first big lesson as an entrepreneur, that you can do something that gives you significance. And it's easier to do that when you're young. I was very young. But ultimately, where are you going to get to if you don't learn to kind of look at things in the cold light of day and say, I'm spending a lot of time here, but really I'm kind of playing at this because there's no progression to it. It doesn't make a profit. And that was hard because I really favored the significance part.
Mm.
And it took me a few years to learn that lesson, and I learned it, and I never kind of went back. And that, I think, I looked back in it at the time and I felt, oh dear, that failed. But actually the lesson was really worth it. So from there, I also came out of that experience saying I'll never work for myself again.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the
Yeah,
last one.
the pressure of having to pay the bills at the end of the month and having no one that you can share that with, and sort of know that even if you're having a bad month, your salary check will be there. That I found after a couple of years was tough. Um, but I think for different reasons. It wasn't because I was self-employed, it was because I hadn't learned how to be profitable.
Right.
So I went from there into working for other people, mostly in customer service and marketing, a little bit of PR. Loved that. And then when I had young kids, I was still working, and I got to a point where I was still painting, still harboring. It never really left me, that draw for painting, for being an artist and wanting that significance from that.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the last big recession, my company went bust. And so I was made redundant. And at that point, I said, okay, I'm going to give this a year. I'm going to paint every day like it was a job. I'm going to apply what I've learned as an entrepreneur. I'm going to follow my creativity, but I'm going to not take any excuses with myself. And so I painted almost every day for the best part of a year. I didn't worry about style. I didn't worry about voice. I just experimented. I tried this. I tried that. I played with this. But the whole thing was that I needed to paint 4 to 5 paintings a week. And in that way, my technique grew, my voice grew. I began to know what it was I wanted to do creatively. And within the first year, I was discovered by a reputable gallery. And they asked me to come down and meet with them, which I did. And that was traumatic in itself because I had, very little kind of confidence at that stage. And that gallery owner asked me to do a solo show. And I did the first solo show of my career. It sold out and I never looked back. And that was it.
You touch on something there that's you touch on many things, but one thing in particular which always struck me is you were never the artist who sort of sits around in coffee shops and just ponders things all the time. You do that a little bit as well, usually with me, but but
Yes, your great excuse.
you have a tremendous work ethic, but almost a scheduled work ethic where you
I
demand
think
things of
I
you.
grew up around a lot of artists, and
Right.
I know a lot of artists, and I've heard that, I would meet somebody and they would say, I'm working on a new show, and I would meet them 2 years later and they would talk about this new show that they're working on, and I'd meet them a year later and they'd be talking about the progression. And, it's like, well, when is this new show coming out? So I think I didn't want to be like that. I wanted to, and also at that stage, I was a single mom responsible for 2 kids. And so I didn't have the luxury of playing at art. It wasn't a hobby. If I couldn't make a living from art at that point in my career, which was early on, after the first year, I had to go back into the office. That was it. And that's the reality for most people. If you are an entrepreneur, there is that point at which it's a side hustle and you haven't staked everything on it. Maybe you've got a daytime job. And the danger is that it really is a hobby. If it is not moving forward, you don't have a goal, it's not profitable, or it's not likely to be, then it's a hobby, you know. And I learned that with my first business. But when I came to being an artist, I was very clear. So it needed, whatever I did needed to work with my values. The art that I was creating, I myself needed to feel happy about. It's not that it had to be perfect. If I was waiting for that, I never would have gone anywhere. I needed to feel that this was art that I really did want to, I was okay with it. Mm-hmm. I had a couple of people, and still do in my life, who I felt that they needed to be okay with what I was producing. Okay, in my case, it was art. And if they were okay with, if they weren't, put it this way, if they weren't okay with it, and even if they weren't okay with a new opportunity or product or thing that I was involved in now, I would pause and listen to them. And the third thing was that, and that's kind of mostly about creativity and authenticity and value around those kinds of things. But the third thing is that it had to make a living, because I had to pay the mortgage, you know, I had to make the payments, I had to look after my girls. So I think that does clarify the mind. Those three things for me have remained my core values from the day I started in 2009 or thereabouts to today. You know, the projects have changed, the opportunities have changed, but those values haven't changed.
And that's very much covering a lot of the question I was going to ask you about, you know, what do you feel are red flags? And I very much get the idea of being clear on your values, and as you said, what's in alignment with that authenticity. But when, for example, because I know various different opportunities come your way, do you have any sort of interpersonal red flags with a dealer or with a company that wants to work with you? Or is there anything there that sort of makes you think, yes, this is good to go ahead? I mean, do you very much trust your intuition, or is it more explicit than that?
I suppose it depends on who we're dealing with, who the opportunity is going to be with, and who I'm going to partner with. But I think the key element is trust. In the gallery industry, trust is everything. Because essentially you are handing over very potentially valuable paintings, and you're not paid until they are sold. And so you're trusting the gallery to tell you when they have sold, and to pay you correctly, to represent you well, to show your work well, to market it well. All of those things are then out of your control. So you know, it's better to marry well than marry in haste. I think is that the expression? I don't think it is. It's a mixture of a couple of them, I think. But I think so, and it's much harder to break up a relationship than it is to become part of a relationship with a gallery. So trust is really, really important. So their reputation, their values as a business person in the industry is really important. In terms of the kind of values with other opportunities, for instance, working with retail people who would sell my fine art prints, for instance, again, it comes down to the values of the business. It's important to me that it's a high quality retail operation, that they are trustworthy, that they will, you know, all of those things work.
It's a very, very interesting point, because, you know, my course is dealing with Goliath, or the podcast is dealing with Goliath, and, you know, the course is all about the Goliath negotiation method. That's what I cover, but it's a very fundamental question to ask oneself whenever we're getting into any kind of arrangement or deal of any kind is, well, what did this other crowd actually stand for?
And what do they want?
And what do they want? Yes.
That's really key, because, and the two flow together, don't they? Because, you know, what they stand for and how they do business will influence what they want from you. But I think it's really useful in dealing with these people and in negotiating is to understand what they need and why they need it. If you understand that, you know immediately whether you want to not go near them 100 miles, or whether then you can get into that negotiation when you know what they need and they want. that understanding allows you to say, well, look, no, I'm not happy to do this, but I understand your need, and therefore here's another thing that might meet a different need for you that might make the whole package worthwhile for you. So that understanding, I think, is really important.
It's a fundamental, as that it goes across different industries, is understanding the need of the other side. How obvious in your experience is that need? I mean, because some needs they'll tell you, I'm aiming to do this and this is why, but other times, as you said, you nearly need to work it out or intuit it.
I think you do have to work it out and intuit it to a large degree, because what somebody in another business say to you, I need this, is sometimes it's to do with a markup or a terms of condition, you know, whatever it is. They may be asking for something, you know, shoot for the stars and you'll hit the trees. They may actually not need that thing, but they're starting there. When you understand what their fundamental needs are and their values, you don't get swayed so much in trying to please them, especially when you're the little guy. You know, when you're the David, you kind of feel, and I think for artists starting out particularly, they have issues with self-confidence. They don't know business maybe so well, and so they're so flattered that maybe a big gallery, an established gallery, come to them, that they'll just say yes to anything, rather than actually saying, okay, how does this relationship work for both of us? What am I actually happy to do and not to do? What happens if it goes wrong? And likewise with working with the more retail side of it, how will this relationship affect my standing, my values, my paintings, my original painting sales? And so saying yes to everything might be detrimental to another part of your business. So you really do need to have a good foundation, good understanding of your needs and their needs, I think, before you go into that negotiation.
And that's, as you said, that's a principle that goes across industries, you know, it's far from just in the art world. But as you said, all the more so when you're essentially a sole trader or a solo entrepreneur, it's all the more important. Yeah. So, you know, you've had a very interesting and diverse career so far, Róisín. So I'm just wondering, what failure was most instructive, or what failure was most helpful, or are you most proud of?
Well, the first business that I referred to, that was very, it still colors me in my decisions and how I work. You know, as in being an artist, there has to be time for play, and there has to be time for creating new work for the sake of the process. You know, so it's not all about just saying, okay, this has got to make money. You know, that's going to kill your creativity if that's your only, you know, thing. But I think what I learned from my first business is, if that's all it is, if it's all about that kind of play and creativity and just that, then the bills aren't going to get paid, you know, and eventually it's going to end. And so the failure of that business really did help me in terms of that. The other thing is, I did a business degree a little while ago, and the guy Blaze said something to me that really stuck with me, which was that the worst thing that you can do is to be head down, arse up. And what he meant by that is in the weeds, in the detail, you know. So if you're an online course creator that you spend 2 years tinkering on your course and trying to get this right or trying to get that right, or, you know, if you're trying to bring out a new product that you spend, you know, you get into the details so much so that you're not progressing. And you can't see the bigger picture in your business, because we all have areas of our business that are comfortable for us to be in. Maybe it's working on the accounts, or maybe it's working on the marketing, but as entrepreneurs, we also need to lift the head up and make critical decisions about what are we spending our time on? Where is the business going? What's making the most money for us and bringing it forward? Those kind of things. So I remind myself of that, you know, at least once a month.
It's taking off the doer cap and putting on the
Yeah.
CEO cap or the executive cap, where you're thinking in a bigger picture, strategic type of way. You know?
And you know, whatever it is, whether it's that you just want to be in the studio painting, and that's fine, but if you want to make money as a business person, you know, whatever it is the thing that you love doing, you do as an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs just love to be doing. We love to be busy, and you know, we can be busy fools. So yeah, not being head down, arse up.
It's a very good piece of advice. It's a very good piece of advice. I mean, is that in some ways one of the things you'd attribute as to why you're one of that very few in any country of artists or creative people who make a very decent living from it? And what I mean by that is it's the same. I think Nassim Taleb called it extremistan, you know, where accountants are in, or lawyers, they all kind of have a fairly dependable income expectation. Whereas when you're in more creative areas, like whether it's you're an author or an actor or an artist, you have a whole load of people at the bottom not making anything, a few people doing okay, and then a few people doing extremely stellarly well. So I'm just wondering, what do you think? And we touched on a few things earlier with your work ethic, but I'm just wondering, do you think there are other attributes? You mentioned getting out of the weeds. Are there other attributes to why you've been so successful and serially successful? I mean, it's not just they were able to sell paintings. You then, you know, created the teaching course on how to and teaching people to paint. Then you did the actual teaching or helping and coaching other artists on how to do the business of art. So, what are some of those key aspects that your other artist clients aren't doing that you give them? I think that's what I'm trying to get at. What is that secret sauce?
Oh, that's a really hard. You know me, I like to talk for Ireland, but that is a hard one to answer. I think it is the ability to look from the top, you know, to look at it as a whole, because my business has changed over the last sort of 10, 12 years. You know, I my first thing was painting and making a living from painting. And that's the foundation to everything, is the painting. I mean, I can't really, in all honesty, teach other people to paint or to be successful as business entrepreneurs who paint if I am not already doing that. So that's the foundation of it all. You know, the prints and the online courses have sort of each in their term kind of, you know, doubled my revenue as I have gone along. But the key is to remember the foundation, because, and everything that I do, I'm passionate about. It really does come from a place of, I hate the word authenticity, you know, integrity. Let's say that.
Sorry, what was the word you used?
Integrity. So
integrity,
you know, the painting is who I am. You know, as my originals have become more expensive, the fine art prints have become something that meet a need for the people who follow me. So, you know, the paintings might be up to sort of 10 grand kind of thing. So not everybody is going to be in that world. And so the challenge is to find another way of meeting that need without harming the integrity of the originals. And so I'm very careful. My prints aren't everywhere. You know, you can't get them in every store everywhere. It's quite select. So there's that part of the business that I'm cautious about and careful about, and making decisions that work for me with it as well. Just because people want prints doesn't mean I should have prints everywhere, and that you know, you go to any shop and find a card of one of my prints, or, you know, you're not going to get it on tea towels and table mats and things like that. And then the online courses, again, is passionate to who I am. I've always loved teaching. I've always found that I have been teaching in every job that I've done along the way. And I'm not somebody who hides what I do. I'm not one of these people who doesn't want to show the process or tell people. So that just kind of is right for me and my values. It comes from who I am. So every part of my business is true to who I am. it fits with who I am. I'd nearly be doing it for free, except that I've learned not to do that. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I think so.
I'm not sure it does completely, but yeah, I think the integrity piece is really important in terms of what I do. And it's not just about making the money. So I think it's that combination, the combination of the business know-how, learning the lessons, and the integrity, which has allowed me to be successful. It's allowed me to develop my revenue alongside actually doing something of worth. And I don't think that either one on its own works. It's,
It's exactly that I can't remember who said it, but you usually do better being able to hold two opposing ideas at the same time. As I said, one of those is that it has to make money, but the other is that you need the freedom in some ways not to be completely money focused. Just like you said, that I suppose it's the strategy and the integrity, strategy in one direction, integrity that unites it from underneath. It's just more so, I'm just continually curious when artists who are obviously talented painters or sculptors or whatever their medium come to you, what is it that they're often missing? Is it a sense of business acumen? Is it trying too hard at business? Is it not trying hard enough? Or what is it you usually give them that then makes their income or their careers jump up to another level?
I think that the most important thing that I give my students who are wanting to make a living from their art is that from the top kind of vision.
Right.
Being able to look at what they do and make, because I'm not wanting them to become mini-me clones, because everybody needs to have what's right for them. But I think it's that ability to think about what is it that I have to give the world and want to give the world, and how can I then make money from that? How can I be ruthless about how I present it to the world in order that I can make money while offering meaning? The other thing that I think that I really help them with is a process for getting there.
Right.
So a process, most people have the ability to make lists and say, this is where I want to get to. But they get totally lost as soon as they start getting into it. And then they get overwhelmed, and then it all goes out the window. So I really, in that course in particular, it's the process of teaching them how to start with an idea, a plan with integrity, and then break it down to actually getting that done. And that's a process that we go over again and again and again over a number of weeks until it becomes a habit for them. And I mean, talk about proud mama bear here. I have so many artists who are now, I walk into a little gallery somewhere and I go, there she is, there's another one, and that's fantastic. And on the painting side of things, the people who come to me are either people who haven't painted very much before, or they have painted in spots and drips and drabs. They might have done a course here or a course there, or they whatever. And again, with them, it's sort of threefold. It's teaching them how to feed that central creative place in order that they have something to say that's unique and valuable and significant. Then learning the technique, because, you can call yourself a knitter if you like, but if you can't actually knit, so they need a level of technique. And then finally that they do the work. That's again the process. So you can say you're an artist, but if you only do 5 paintings in a year, you won't have anything to present to the world. And so it's process related as well. So there's a sort of a holistic look of what actually it means to be an artist, and that's kind of really what I teach. That's the central core of the message for them.
There's an interesting parallel there for people in other industries, I think, where often stepping out, as you said, it's great to go incredibly deep into what you're doing to have that expertise, so that you can see things that maybe your competition can't. But as you said, you need that balance of stepping up above the weeds and seeing the big picture. And part of that seeing the big picture, okay, you're doing it in a strategic way, seeing opportunities, making choices, value-based choices, integrity-based choices, and so on. But it's also then, as I said, seeing contrasts from outside of your industry. And as you said, that helps develop that unique point of view, which I think is quite important for people in nearly any industry. It's like, well, why? I used to say this to groups of lawyers and accountants and whatnot, where I said, well, why should anyone go to you rather than your rivals down the road? And often the reasons were very kind of, oh, we're dependable and we're this and we're that. Things that are normally expected, you know. There's not actual differentiation. And it sounds like that's what you're helping people develop on top of the strategy and integrity mix.
I'm very interested in people who are successful entrepreneurs who have not taken the normal route.
Yeah.
So generally entrepreneurs by definition are going to take their own route to wherever they're going to get. They tend to be individualistic. They tend to be ideas people, hard workers, self-driven, self-motivated. People who, you know, want to follow the corporate sort of path and fit into that well and enjoy that sense of order will often end up in bigger companies working for other people and very contentedly doing so.
Right.
But I'm always interested in looking at the outsiders that have become successful. Women often have come foul of that corporate structure, and those that are entrepreneurial have succeeded in doing it in their own way. People of color, people with disabilities, people with dyslexia or ADHD or those kind of mental health challenges who have become entrepreneurs, not despite their failings, but they've woven it into how they have made things work for them. And I'm always really interested to see how they do that. And I'm always really heartened to see it because I recognize that in myself, and it gives me confidence to feel that, I mean, I do believe that you need to grow outside of just yourself. I mean, I have a team now who support me in my work, but it's on my terms. Many of them are women, not all of them, all over the world. We're mostly working remotely. I don't really want a big team in an office. I like the solitude in order to allow me to create and to paint. But I also understand that if I do everything myself, I'm limiting how my business can grow. So, but finding, and I think for entrepreneurs, this I think is something that I kind of did want to talk about, is that when it's just you, whether you're an artist or, you know, an entrepreneur doing anything, the jump between being on your own to one person working for you, I think is the biggest jump. And I don't have an experience of having a huge team, so I don't really have much experience about that. But I think sometimes we take that look at it, which is the sort of corporate thing, and we think we have to employ a person. And we don't. And I think that the way forward for entrepreneurs is this whole idea of hours. So you have, you know, somebody who looks after your Facebook ads or your marketing, and you've got somebody who's a VA who specializes in managing your website or in dealing with orders, or maybe you have a team of those people under somebody else who's an online business manager. That's, I find, the way forward for those of us who are essentially sole traders, but who are growing and need support. And so in my business, I have an online business manager who, under her, then she's in Germany, in Leipzig, and under her she has a team of people who have different roles, who are offering hours into my business. So all of that work can be done in an organized, efficient way. And then I would have other people working here in Ireland, but again, they're working remotely. We meet up for meetings or whatever as need be, but I am essentially still working on my own from my studio and from my office, and then just pulling in that support as I need it. And I think that that's a really great, I think that that has helped me hugely as a model to go from being a sole trader to a sole trader plus 5 or 7 or whatever it is as it grows.
It's a very interesting point. Is that a lot of these things people are getting to grips with more, regardless of their situation with COVID the last year. But as you said, these things are at our fingertips now if we can use them well. Just to flip it for a moment, because I know you're a very hard-working woman, but what kind of balance do you give to relaxing or to downtime or life outside work? And what would you, again, do you tell your business artist students the importance
Well,
of that, or lack
it's
thereof? I mean, are you?
it's absolutely incredibly important, and for many entrepreneurs, I think they you know, it's head down and no fun, you know, because they're workaholics. It doesn't. It isn't. It's a myth that that kind of work will get you closer to your goals. It's actually the opposite. It's when we step away and we go, and, you know, when I go to live music, it's like restorative. I come out and somehow my world vision has just expanded by about 180 degrees. Nothing to do with art, nothing to do with business. You know, reading, you know, going to meet friends for coffee or lunch. You know, Al and not you, we're hopefully going to do that tomorrow. We haven't been able to with COVID. But, you know, like, you know, that I do that. We go into town, I go wander around the galleries or not, meet somebody for lunch, chat about stuff that isn't on your to-do list, conversations that aren't about, you know, all the stuff I have to do and how stressed I am, but ideas and, you know, bigger thoughts and fun. You know, that's absolutely important to, and being able to shut the business. I mean, I found that difficult at the beginning. I think, you know, my kind of workaholic-y feel. But in my last business, my first business, when I was only 21, I worked all the hours every day. I worked holidays and I never made any money. You don't make money by doing that. That is not the key. That is the myth, that if you work harder, you'll make more money. To a large degree, it seems Machiavellian, but to some degree, when you work less, you will make more because
I
you
suppose
come back at that.
it's such a good point. I was listening to a podcast with a mentor of mine interviewing a guy who was coaching contractors. And he actually said the same thing, this myth that, oh, you just work more hours is how you make more money or how you improve your business. And like that has a limit. You only have 24 of them
Exactly.
in
We
the
all have the
day.
same 24 hours. Yeah.
But
And
and then you kind of remind me of the classic Tim Ferriss 4 hour work week thing. I know it's somewhat a myth because it should be
yeah,
called the 4 hour grunt work week, but the point was the same, was he was in hospital or something like this and he could only work a very limited number of hours in a week or in a day. So it was that ruthless streamlining and efficiency that he managed to get out of it. So it's that same idea. You actually remind me of something that I used to bring to a lot of my coaching clients, which is something you do. And you were talking about process earlier, and that was a huge thing. Basically, just getting this habit, this relentlessness, momentum going. And one thing you used to say to me was, and I don't know when you do it, I think you had to drop your kids to school and you do a few other things, and then I think it was at 9 or 9:30 every morning you'd be priming the canvas, as you used to call it. And I used to use this metaphor with all sorts of business people that I would talk to, this idea that you just, at a certain time, you're almost on autopilot doing an activity, a process, which then leads you into the important work that you have to do. And you used to say to me, you know, whether you knew exactly what you were painting that day or you didn't really have a clue, you would start this process at the same time, 5 days a week, standing at the canvas doing your thing. And then by the time you'd prime the canvas, where you put primer on the raw canvas, then you'd have some ideas and you'd start playing or start working. So
what for me that's about is there's always something, like the tyranny of the urgent, you know, there's always something you have to do. There's always an email, there's always somebody I have to get back to, there's always something I need to answer. If I always follow that, I'll never get to the canvas, and also there is a certain anxiety, there's a certain uncomfortableness with creating. There's a reticence, I mean, my mum, who's also an artist, used to say to me, how's it going today? Would I be working on a painting? And I'd say, it's torture. And I've learned to live with the torture of creating now. It isn't always I think that I hate when my students say, oh, I'm just lost in my own world painting, because I know then that they're not conscious to it. They're not present to it. They're just fiddling away. The real strength of your work will come when you are wrestling with it, you know, for good or for bad, you know, the good, the bad and the ugly. That doesn't matter. The end game doesn't matter. That's the process, you being there and bringing this thing into life. So I find routine is really good there. So as I said, you know, I present myself to the canvas. Now, if I end up just cleaning my palette and organizing my stuff, I'm still in that place. I'm still thinking. I'm maybe working on ideas, but I am there. I'm in front of the canvas. I'm in the studio.
Right.
If I allow myself to go into the office and answer that email and answer that, I'll be there for hours. So the routine means that that's what I do on a Tuesday morning at 9:30. I present myself to the canvas. That's what I do. I don't think about the outcome of that. That's the bit that trips you up. Is it going to be good or bad? Is this not going to be a good painting? I'm no good. That's the stuff that you have to let go of. But the part you are responsible for is, are you present to it? Are you standing in front of the canvas? Are you there? Are you, allowing that creativity to develop and to make that work? And not, so many people, when they get to that part where it's uncomfortable, will go off and do, whether it's they're putting a wash on in the washing machine, or you have to go walk the dog.
Yeah, I love the way I love the way you're talking about it, because you're reminding me of, being acutely aware of the difference between lead goals and lag goals, or lead activities and lag activities. So it's that kind of thing that we all want to make sales, but you don't have very much control over whether you make a sale. In the outcome, you do have, increased the likelihood by making sure you have, a show booked in, making sure you have the dates in the calendar with the gallery, then, making sure you're painting as many pictures as you need in whatever time to get it done. So it's all of those other activities that lead up to increase the likelihood of getting the lag activity, which you don't have.
I always say to my students that whether or not that painting is going to sell is none of your business.
It's an interesting
because
point.
If you start to paint in order to create something that will sell, in other words, you say you had a show and 6 of the paintings that featured that blue kind of abstract thing sold. So then you go into the studio and you start trying to make more of those. You're chasing something, instead of concentrating on the process of what allowed you, the problem, the question, the whatever that allowed you to create those in the first place. Maybe they'll end up being pink. Maybe they'll end up being something different. But because they have integrity, they're good work, they will sell. The selling bit is not, I know you have to make money, but if you chase that bit, you will lose the integrity of the work. And that's where art schools get this notion of commercial work is bad. It's that notion of chasing sales as a creative. It's very harmful. So as I always say to them, whether this sells or not is none of your business. Your business is to present yourself to the process, to create work that you're proud of, to improve your technique, to put the raw materials of your sort of feeding the well of your creativity and finding that inspiration so that you have something to say, and then doing the work in a measured, controlled, consistent way. Then you put on your business cap. It's almost like I say to people in the Love to Sell course that they need to be 2 people. There's you, the artist, who's almost like the inner child. You're vulnerable. You have maybe some issues with self-confidence. Is this work good? But that's the part also that needs to be nurtured in order to do the real creating with integrity. Once the painting is created, it then becomes a product, if you want it to be. And then you market that, and you have to let go of that inner child at that point and become a hard-nosed business person and say, okay, is this the right, are my prices too low? Are they higher? Am I putting in the right environments? Am I doing the right deals? Am I leaving money on the table? That's a whole other side to you. And we can wear those 2 caps, but we do need to keep them a bit separate, I think.
It's a beautiful point. I mean, that's one of the pieces of advice I used to give parallels with that, where the easiest way to negotiate better, like noticeably better, particularly when it's you're selling or negotiating something that's more of you, that you have more sort of, it's more, you feel more vulnerable through it, is to do it in the third person.
Yeah.
To pretend that you're negotiating on behalf of a friend rather than for yourself. And then you get so much better at it.
So many people say to me, I could sell my friend's work, no problem. But when it's my work and I'm standing on a stand or at an exhibition or something, and someone comes over, I get all sawdust in my mouth, and I can't do it. And that's it. You've got to act as if. You've got to put on a persona that and play that part. You're almost acting. You go into the room, and you've got to play the part.
So we're just coming up on time there, Róisín. It's been fantastic talking with you. If people want to learn a little bit more about you, or potentially even want to learn to paint or improve their art business, where can they learn more about you?
Well, they can find me on roisinO'Farrell.com. That's my website. And from there, they can look at my prints or my originals or the school. So that's the gateway to my world.
The gateway to your world, to the paintings, to the prints, to all of the courses as well. Brilliant stuff. I'll of course post those links below this video and below the podcast. So fantastic talking to you.
Thank you so much. I've had
to you again soon. Oh, and happy birthday, I think.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.